On March 4, 2025, the American economy was rocked by a seismic event that sent shockwaves through financial markets and households alike. The day began like any other, but by noon, the world was watching as the United States braced for a dramatic shift in its economic landscape. President Donald Trump, standing before a packed press room, announced sweeping new tariffs that would fundamentally alter America's trade relationships. The news broke live on every major network, with anchors scrambling to interpret the implications for viewers across the country. Effective immediately, a 25% tariff was imposed on nearly all goods imported from Canada and Mexico, America's two largest trading partners. At the same time, tariffs on Chinese goods were hiked to 20%, escalating an already tense trade standoff and sending a clear message to global markets. The administration claimed these measures would protect American jobs, revive struggling industries, and fight the flow of illegal drugs across the border. Supporters hailed the move as a bold stand for American workers, but the reality was far more complicated and fraught with risk. For decades, the US, Canada, and Mexico had built a tightly woven economic partnership, with supply chains stretching across borders and millions of jobs depending on the free flow of goods. The new tariffs threatened to unravel this integration overnight, leaving businesses scrambling to adapt. Business leaders and economists quickly sounded the alarm, warning of catastrophic costs and widespread disruption. Industries from automotive to agriculture began urgent meetings, trying to assess the fallout and brace for the uncertainty ahead. For ordinary Americans, the impact was immediate and personal. Prices on everyday goods, from avocados to automobiles, began to climb, and grocery store shelves grew sparse as supply chains faltered. The policy, intended as a shield, quickly revealed itself as a self-inflicted wound. The scale of the tariffs was unprecedented, a 25% tax on almost all imports from Canada and Mexico, plus a targeted 10% tariff on Canadian energy. Ports and border crossings became choke points, with trucks and cargo ships delayed for days. The shock was immediate, reverberating from Wall Street to Main Street. Newsstands blared alarming headlines and families gathered around televisions, anxious about what the future would hold. The aftershocks, experts warned, were only beginning. America's economic foundation, built over decades of cooperation and open markets, was being shaken overnight. As uncertainty spread, the nation faced a pivotal moment, one that would test its resilience and redefine its place in the global economy. For Ford Motor Company, the sudden imposition of tariffs was more than just a business challenge. It was an existential threat that shook the very foundation of the company. For over a century, Ford had stood as a symbol of American industrial might, weathering wars, recessions, and fierce competition. But this time, the threat came not from rivals or economic downturns, but from a policy shift that threatened to unravel the intricate web of global trade Ford depended on. Ford's business model relies on a seamless North American supply chain, with thousands of parts crossing borders multiple times before a single vehicle rolls off the assembly line. Every bolt, chip, and panel is part of a complex dance between factories in the US, Canada, and Mexico. Disrupting this flow meant delays, shortages, and skyrocketing costs. Industry analysts sounded the alarm, warning that the tariffs could wipe out profits for the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Chrysler. The numbers were stark, billions in potential losses, with no easy way to recover. As news of the tariffs spread, Ford's stock price plummeted. Investors, already wary of the shifting economic landscape, panicked at the prospect of shrinking margins and uncertain futures. Inside Ford's boardrooms, executives faced impossible choices. Should they absorb the massive new costs, risking the company's financial health, or pass them on to consumers, knowing it could price their vehicles out of reach for many Americans? Prices for iconic vehicles like the Ford F-150, the best-selling truck in America, were set to soar. Higher sticker prices threatened to dampen demand, putting sales, profits, and thousands of jobs at risk. Ironically, the very policy designed to protect American manufacturing now risked crippling it. Workers on the factory floor watched anxiously, uncertain if their jobs would survive the fallout. Ford quickly became the symbol of an industry in crisis, caught in the crossfire of a global trade war. Headlines blared warnings of layoffs, plant closures, and a future clouded by uncertainty. The tariffs weren't just a tax on imports, they were a penalty for participating in the global economy. Every shipment, every part, every car became more expensive, threatening the delicate balance that kept the industry running. For Ford and its workers, the future looked frighteningly uncertain. The company faced a crossroads, forced to adapt or risk being left behind in a rapidly changing world. For decades, the North American supply chain has been a finely tuned dance, connecting factories, workers, and companies across the US, Canada, and Mexico. This intricate network, built on trust and efficiency, suddenly found itself on shaky ground, threatened by new policies and uncertainty. Every car assembled in the United States is a true product of international teamwork. Parts and components don't just cross borders once, they often make the journey several times, as raw materials are transformed into finished products. A single vehicle might contain steel from Canada, electronics from Mexico, and engineering from Detroit, all coming together in a seamless process. But with the introduction of new tariffs, this seamless flow was disrupted. Components could now be taxed at every border crossing, a phenomenon known as cascading tariffs. This meant that the cost of a single part could double or even triple by the time it reached the assembly line, making cars much more expensive to build. Automakers faced a harsh reality. They couldn't just switch to domestic suppliers overnight. The supply chain was too complex and the expertise too specialized. Years of collaboration and investment couldn't be replaced with the flip of a switch. The immediate result was devastating. Production lines ground to a halt, plants were forced to close their doors, and thousands of workers found themselves out of a job. For those still able to buy a car, prices soared, putting new vehicles out of reach for many families. The once integrated North American auto industry was thrown into chaos. Meetings that once focused on innovation now centered on crisis management and survival. The new policy failed to recognize a simple truth. American cars are, in reality, North American products. They are the result of cross-border cooperation and shared expertise. By targeting this interconnected ecosystem, the tariffs didn't just hurt foreign competitors, they threatened the very foundation of American industry, risking long-term damage to jobs, innovation, and economic growth. The music of cross-border cooperation, once the heartbeat of the industry, abruptly stopped. Factories that once buzzed with activity fell eerily silent, leaving workers and communities in shock. The consequences were swift and severe, rippling through the economy and leaving a lasting mark on the lives of countless families and the future of the North American auto industry. The real pain hit American families. New car prices soared as automakers passed on tariff costs. A 10% tariff on Canadian energy meant higher gas prices, especially in the Northeast. Experts predicted up to 40 cents more per gallon, hitting lower-income families hardest. The tariffs triggered a wave of inflation, raising prices on groceries, electronics, and more. The average household faced an extra $1,000 in annual costs. The policy, sold as protection for workers, became a direct tax on their daily lives. Americans were footing the bill for a trade war that threatened their own stability. America's trading partners struck back fast. Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau called the tariffs a very dumb thing to do, and imposed 25% retaliatory tariffs on billions in U.S. goods. Ontario pulled American liquor from shelves and threatened surcharges on electricity exports. Mexico's President Sheinbaum promised to target U.S. agricultural exports. The USMCA partnership fractured as Canada and Mexico united in opposition. China responded with tariffs on American farm products, hitting Trump's political base. The trade war escalated on multiple fronts, with no winners in sight. America's closest allies became adversaries overnight. The global economic order was thrown into turmoil. The markets reacted with panic. The Dow plunged over 600 points on announcement day, capping a week of heavy losses. Economic forecasts for 2025 were slashed from 2.5% growth to just 1%. The threat of job losses loomed large, with economists warning of net losses, not gains. Up to 1 million Canadian jobs were at risk too. Businesses froze hiring and investment, paralyzed by uncertainty. The tariffs injected instability, stalling the engine of American growth. The promise of protection turned into a drag on the entire economy. The longer the trade war continued, the deeper the damage became. The American economy was sputtering, with no clear end in sight. The national debate erupted. Economists across the spectrum condemned the tariffs as destructive. Some politicians called it a negotiating tactic, but the damage was real and immediate. The United Auto Workers Union surprisingly supported the tariffs, hoping for a return of lost jobs. This created a paradox. Workers most at risk supported the very policy threatening their jobs. The debate revealed deep anxieties about globalization and economic security. Politicians, workers, and experts talked past each other as the crisis deepened. The nation was divided, with the economic foundation cracking beneath the strain. History offered a grim warning. The Smoot-Hawley tariff of the 1930s deepened the Great Depression by triggering global retaliation. The parallels were clear: protectionism led to trade wars and everyone lost. Experts warned the US was repeating past mistakes, risking recession and disaster. Trade isn't a zero-sum game. Mutual exchange creates prosperity. The administration's threat of reciprocal tariffs signaled a dangerous commitment to escalation. Hopes of rolling back tariffs were slim, as the policy was tied to unrelated issues like drug enforcement. America stood at a precipice, facing the same abyss as before. Would history's lessons be heeded or ignored once again? As the dust settled, America faced a self-inflicted economic crisis. Ford's struggles were just the beginning. The entire industrial landscape was at risk. Consumers faced higher prices, businesses faced impossible choices, and markets lost confidence. Allies became adversaries and the global economy was destabilized. The path forward was uncertain: double down on tariffs or retreat and repair the damage. The longer the trade war dragged on, the more permanent the harm. The fate of American industry and millions of jobs hung in the balance. The gamble had already gone terribly wrong, and the stakes had never been higher.